Kendrick Green's promotion wasn't supposed to happen. Not now. Not like this. But when Cleveland's offensive line failures became too loud to ignore, both on film and across social media, the Browns stopped waiting. Behind the scenes, coaches had seen enough. And amid rising pressure from inside and out, they made their first calculated leap. Shedeur Sanders was showing growth. But the hits? They were mounting. And the team's gamble on patience was quickly becoming a risk they couldn't afford. What followed wasn't chaos, it was clarity. In pivoting toward deliberate protection and bringing back key defenders like Donnell Ward, Cleveland showed they finally understand the stakes. A young quarterback can't grow behind a crumbling wall. By acting now, the Browns are betting on continuity, not damage control. It's the first real sign that they're serious about building around Sanders, not just surviving with him. And that might be the most important change yet.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Jimmy Haslam made it very clear without saying a word. The Cleveland Browns were done waiting. When the news dropped that they'd signed offensive lineman Kendrick Green from the practice squad mid-season, it wasn't just a depth move, it was a signal. The front office, known for playing the long game and hedging their bets, finally blinked. Something about this season, and this quarterback, changed their entire posture. And Haslam, who's taken heat for years over questionable decisions, seemed to finally accept the urgency the fans had been screaming about. This wasn't about perfection. This wasn't about building chemistry. This was about now. A December signing for an offensive lineman is rarely about slow integration. It's a white flag moment that says, "We hear you." And more importantly, we hear him. Him, of course, being Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur has been playing like a quarterback caught in a storm, and not the fun kind. Week after week, pressure collapsed the pocket faster than the broadcast graphics could even display the down and distance. And yet, somehow through it all he kept standing, kept making throws, kept pretending like the hits didn't shake him. But they did. The hits added up and everyone could see it. The fans, the analysts, even the coaching staff started showing it in their tone. Still, Shedeur's composure was undeniable. Warm-up footage of him before games showed a player locked in, not rattled. Not broken. He looked calm, like he knew something everyone else didn't. And that confidence? That's exactly why this team is finally pivoting. They know what they have. They've just been too slow to act on it. So when Kendrick Green got the call-up, the timeline made it obvious. They're trying to protect a real investment. Offensive line changes this late in the season are typically viewed as disruptive. It takes time to gel and cohesion is everything. But the Browns are beyond that luxury. Sanders has been running for his life, and at some point you stop chasing ideal scenarios and start dealing with the reality on the field. The signing wasn't elegant, it was necessary. Green's addition may not be glamorous, but it shows the franchise is finally treating the offensive line with the seriousness it deserves. It's not about plugging holes anymore, it's about building a wall around their future. They've moved from reaction to preparation, and it took weeks of criticism to get there. The pressure to change didn't come out of nowhere. It built up week after week, game after game. You could almost hear the fans gritting their teeth every time a defensive end flew past a Browns tackle untouched. And by November, social media was a battlefield. Fans didn't just want change, they demanded it. People were naming names, calling for benches, and some even wondered aloud if the front office had given up on this season entirely. All of that noise eventually pierced the walls of Berea. And to their credit, the Browns responded. Signing Kendrick Green may have looked small on the transaction wire, but in context, it was massive. It told fans they were being heard, and more than that, it told Sanders that the team had his back. The return of Donnell Ward added more than just talent to the field, it added balance. Ward is one of those defensive anchors whose presence shifts the energy. He closes gaps, he neutralizes wide receivers, and he buys the offense breathing room. His comeback helped stabilize a team that felt lopsided all season. By boosting the defense, the Browns didn't just improve one side of the ball. They took pressure off Sanders indirectly. With fewer shootouts and more controlled game flow, the quarterback finally had space to work. This wasn't just roster tinkering, it was chess. And for once, it looked like the Browns were thinking 2 steps ahead instead of reacting a move too late. Through it all, Sanders' development didn't just survive, it somehow thrived. His decision-making under fire showed flashes of a player maturing faster than expected. Even as he got hit, hurried, and harassed in the pocket, his reads improved. He started throwing the ball away when needed, checking down smartly and timing his scrambles better. That growth didn't happen in a vacuum. The coaching staff noticed. And now that the team is finally adjusting around him instead of expecting him to carry everything, there's a real sense that they're building something cohesive. Something sustainable. And all of it begins with interviews with Shedeur started sounding different too. Less diplomatic, more grounded. He wasn't throwing anyone under the bus, but you could sense his awareness. He knew the O-line was struggling, and he also knew he couldn't fix it alone. And now he doesn't have to. Adding Green, welcoming back Ward, and reassessing weak spots on both sides of the ball signaled a unified shift. The organization isn't just surviving, they're retooling. And in a league as cutthroat as the NFL, that distinction matters. Teams that wait for the draft to fix their issues often fall behind. The Browns are finally acting like they get that. Mid-season changes like this are risky, but they also show conviction. The Browns have operated like a hesitant franchise for years, half-committed, overly cautious, reactive. But signing a new lineman in December? That's not conservative. That's urgent. And that urgency might just be what saves the season. Cleveland is well aware that the clock is ticking, not just on this year but on Sanders' rookie contract window. Every game matters. Every hit Sanders takes is a potential setback not just for the moment, but for the long-term trajectory of the team. Protecting him isn't optional, it's foundational. What's also clear is that the fans played a role in forcing this pivot. When enough people call out poor protection on social media, and when those same complaints are echoed by national analysts, pressure builds. Teams can't afford to ignore that kind of visibility anymore. And in Cleveland, where trust in the organization has been paper-thin, listening to the fan base may have been the smartest PR move they could have made. The combination of external pressure and internal evaluation finally produced a response. Not just a patch, not just a soundbite, but a real move. A move that says the Browns are done pretending everything's fine. They're owning the urgency, and that shift is seismic for a team trying to evolve past its chaotic. At the center of it all is Shedeur Sanders. Not because he's the loudest or the flashiest, but because his poise under pressure has forced the team's hand. He's proven week after week that he's not going to crumble. And that kind of resilience is rare, especially in a rookie. If the Browns continue building around him with intention instead of improvisation, they might finally have a real foundation. This season may have started with panic, but it's shifting into something more strategic, more hopeful. And Shedeur's growth, both mental and mechanical, is driving that momentum. Kendrick Green didn't walk into a stable situation. He wasn't being added to a high-functioning line or a well-oiled machine. He was walking into a mess, a unit in crisis. But that's exactly why his arrival mattered. It wasn't about being a savior, it was about showing that someone was willing to fight for this quarterback. To change the equation even slightly. And while Green may not be a household name or the kind of acquisition that breaks news alerts across the league, his signing carried more symbolic weight than anything else the Browns had done all year. It marked the first time the franchise made a move that directly aligned with what the moment. All season, Sanders has absorbed pressure like a crash test dummy. And somehow he's still functioning. That's not just durability, it's discipline. And it's the kind of mental strength teams dream of in a franchise quarterback. It's the difference between surviving and building. Watching him maneuver around crumbling protection, throw on the move, and keep his cool when the pocket imploded became its own kind of weekly ritual. And while the highlight reels showed flashes of brilliance, they also told a darker story, the story of a quarterback left too exposed too often. The signing of Green was a small but necessary answer to that. If there's one thing Cleveland fans know, it's dysfunction. They've seen it all, front office blunders, coaching chaos, draft busts. And for a while this season looked like more of the same. But then the tone changed. Slowly, subtly, the Browns started behaving like a team that didn't want to repeat history. The moves were small but deliberate. Green came in. Ward returned. The protection schemes were tweaked. And most importantly, there was visible intention behind every adjustment. For once, the Browns weren't reacting after things went wrong, they were trying to prevent it. And that mindset shift, especially in the back half of the season, could define how this franchise moves forward. Jimmy Haslam's fingerprints may not be on every personnel move, but his influence is undeniable. When the pressure mounts and the criticism reaches the ownership suite, things start happening. And that's exactly what unfolded. The backlash over the offensive line wasn't just an online echo chamber, it reached the top. Haslam, known for his hands-on approach, sometimes to a fault, clearly saw enough. The organization stopped pushing narratives and started pushing paperwork. Transactions were made. Holes were acknowledged. And the timing wasn't subtle, it was a public acknowledgement that the stakes had changed. Timing is everything in the NFL. Mid-season adjustments are always risky, but sometimes waiting is riskier. For the Browns, acting in December, when most teams are focused on playoff seeds or off-season plans, meant one thing: they're still fighting. They're still trying to make this version of the team work. Not next year. Not after the draft. No. That urgency, that pivot from passive to active, could end up being the difference between another wasted season and the beginning of a real turnaround. Because in this league, momentum isn't just earned, it's manufactured. And the Browns are finally trying to manufacture it. Shedeur's preseason composure was one thing. Everyone chalked it up to confidence or maybe just inexperience before the real hits started landing. But as the season wore on and the bruises piled up, his demeanor didn't shift. That calm stayed. That presence stayed. And when he spoke after games, it was clear he wasn't just trying to survive, he was trying to lead. That leadership is why these moves matter. The franchise isn't just trying to protect a quarterback, they're trying to protect a leader. One who's shown he can handle adversity, but who shouldn't have to do it alone. And finally, it seems like Cleveland gets that. The fan reaction has played a massive role in all of this. Every missed block, every sack, every blown assignment, fans noticed. And they didn't stay quiet about it. Social media turned into a full-blown protest. Analysts picked up on it. Reporters asked the uncomfortable questions. And somewhere in all that noise, the Browns finally listened. The organization has been criticized for years for tuning out the very people who fill their stadium. But this season, something shifted. They acted. Not perfectly, not all at once, but they acted. And Shedeur's voice hasn't been loud, but it's been steady. In a franchise known for dysfunction and instability, his presence feels different. Measured. Intentional. And it's forced the people around him to rise to the occasion, because it's hard to justify asking more from a guy already giving everything with so little support. He hasn't asked for excuses. He hasn't played the blame game. But the Browns seem to understand now that if they want to build around him, they need to start with protection. Not flash, not gimmicks, just basic, fundamental. Getting Donnell Ward back on the field helped more than anyone expected. His return didn't just improve the secondary, it calmed the defense. Suddenly things looked more organized, more disciplined. And with fewer blown coverages, fewer deep shots allowed, the offense didn't have to play catch-up every possession. That kind of stability is what young quarterbacks thrive on. It buys time both on the field and in the development arc. And in a season where everything felt like a scramble, Ward's presence helped steady the ship. The Browns are still a work in progress. No one's pretending they've solved their issues with one signing or one injury return. But the difference is, they're trying. And that shift, that refusal to just ride the chaos out and hope for the best, is meaningful. This isn't a team folding under pressure. It's a team responding to it. And while there's a long road ahead with plenty of personnel decisions still to make, the foundation being laid now matters. Because it's being laid with. There's something about Shedeur's presence that makes the mess around him feel even more absurd. He doesn't look like a rookie. He doesn't sound like one. And despite the lack of protection, despite the late hits and broken pockets, he's been one of the most composed players on the field every week. You don't get that kind of mental toughness from film sessions alone. That's something else. Something Cleveland hasn't had at quarterback in years. And maybe that's why this shift, this new urgency from the front office, finally feels real. They know they have someone worth protecting. And the longer they wait, the harder it becomes to keep him standing. The Kendrick Green signing is still being picked apart. Some fans are cautiously optimistic. Others think it's too little, too late. But either way, it's a step. It's movement. And for a team that's been criticized for standing still while chaos builds around them, movement is progress. Green's not a guaranteed solution, but he doesn't need to be. What he represents is the Browns finally getting out of their own way. Finally saying, we can't keep waiting for things to magically fix themselves. And that mindset? That's new. That's important. The games leading up to this point weren't just losses on the scoreboard. They were losses of confidence. Sanders took hits that made fans wince. Blocks were missed that looked like basic assignments. And the frustration? It wasn't subtle. From the stands to the sidelines, the energy was tense. Every failed drive sparked another round of questions. Why hasn't this line been fixed? Why are we still putting our quarterback in danger every single week? And finally, those questions reached someone with the authority to change things. Kendrick Green might have been buried on a practice squad, but now he's a statement. It's hard not to connect this shift to Haslam. When ownership moves, the whole organization moves. And while the Browns haven't said anything official about why they acted now, the timing makes it clear. They hit a breaking point. The noise got too loud. The risk got too real. And the price of inaction was starting to look like something they couldn't afford. Whether it was conversations behind closed doors or direct input from Haslam himself, something snapped. And for once it snapped in the right direction. Urgency replaced indifference. Strategy replaced denial. And the fans. Shedeur has handled the spotlight better than most veterans. But leadership only works when it's supported. And now that the team is finally acknowledging what he's endured, the dynamic shifts. It's not just Shedeur leading, it's the team finally following. This kind of quarterback maturity demands a supporting cast. It demands infrastructure. And while no one expects Cleveland to transform overnight, the foundation is finally being addressed. It took pressure, embarrassment, and maybe a few too many sacks, but the Browns are moving. Every season has a turning point. And sometimes it doesn't come from a win or a highlight play. Sometimes it comes from a personnel move in the middle of the week. Something small, quiet, but with big implications. That's what this feels like. The Kendrick Green signing isn't the headline, it's the subtext. It's what it represents. That this team is tired of being embarrassed. Tired of wasting potential. And most of all, tired of watching Shedeur Sanders get dragged to the ground while everyone just shrugs. Getting Donnell Ward back was a reminder of what this team looks like at full power. He brought back confidence to a defense that had been scrambling. And that defensive improvement did something else. It bought Shedeur time. Maybe not in the pocket but in the game. Fewer points given up. Shorter fields. Manageable drives. That balance matters. You can't build a young quarterback with pressure coming from both sides of the ball. And Ward's return made it clear that the Browns are serious about fixing the whole picture, not just slapping a Band-Aid on the offense. The fan base deserves credit. They've been loud, relentless, and brutally honest. And while the Browns have a history of tuning that out, this time felt different. Maybe it was the way the criticism was framed. Maybe it was the consistency. But whatever it was, the front office listened. And when teams listen to their fans and act accordingly, that usually signals a culture shift. One where the front office stops acting like the smartest people in the room and starts acting like a team that wants to win. Now, not eventually. As his preseason post-game. Shedeur's body language in interviews hasn't changed much since preseason. Still calm. Still focused. Still carrying the weight without letting it show. But that doesn't mean he hasn't felt it. Quarterbacks don't forget sacks. They don't forget blindside hits. And they definitely don't forget games where they had to do everything alone. Now, with some protection starting to form and support trickling in from the top down, that mental load eases just a bit. He doesn't have to carry the entire season anymore. He just has to keep doing what he's already doing, and finally, others are starting to match that effort. This isn't about winning the next game. It's about not wasting what you have. The Browns have talent. They have potential. They even have the beginnings of an identity. But none of that matters if they can't protect their quarterback. Everything the Browns are doing now is about preservation. Preserving Sanders' health, his confidence, and his development. Because those three things are the currency of the future. Lose them and you're back to rebuilding. Keep them and you have a shot at being something real. Segment SS NFL Match Compilation. The quarterback's journey so far has been a highlight reel wrapped in survival mode. Every game, Shedeur Sanders walks onto that field knowing the protection might collapse, that the reads might need to happen in half the time, that one hit could change everything. And yet, he shows up, mentally locked in, physically dialed, and still leading. That kind of resilience doesn't show up in box scores. But it changes how a franchise operates. You don't ignore a player like that. You build around him and you do it fast. The Browns are finally learning that the hard way. It took too many sacks and too many angry fans, but the lesson is sticking. Kendrick Green wasn't brought in to save the season. He was brought in to stop the bleeding. And sometimes that's all a team needs to start the shift. A move that says, we're not going to let this happen again. Because while quarterbacks get the spotlight, offensive lines are what make or break careers. The Browns gambled for too long, hoping patchwork schemes and rotation bodies could hold. They couldn't. And Green's arrival, however low profile, proves that the team isn't waiting for things to break anymore. They're finally building the wall before the storm hits. It's taken months of games, injuries, headlines, and fan outrage to force this shift, but now that it's started, it can't stop here. The offensive line isn't fixed. The protection isn't solved. One signing doesn't erase a year of instability. But it does signal the first step in a longer process, one that centers the quarterback, not just the scheme. This franchise has spent too many seasons reacting. Now it's time they start preparing. And the fans know it. They've seen what unprepared looks like. Now they want to see what commitment feels like. At the top of the pyramid, Jimmy Haslam knows what's at stake. This isn't just about wins and losses. It's about a narrative, one that's followed this team for years. Dysfunction. Wasted potential. Constant turnover. If the Browns want to rewrite that script, it starts here, with urgency, with infrastructure, and with a quarterback they can finally believe in. And to everyone watching from the outside, whether it's fans, analysts, or former players, this moment feels like a fork in the road. Stay the course and things fall apart again. Change direction now and you finally have a shot at something that lasts longer than a flash-in-the-pan season. So what do you think? Is this finally the turning point for Cleveland, or just another detour on the road to nowhere? Hit that like button if you're ready to see Shedeur get the protection he deserves. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Should the Browns double down on offensive line help in the offseason? And if you're all in on watching this team evolve in real time, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a second of the drama. Let's see if the Browns are really ready to build, or if we're back here again next season still talking about what could have been.